Hey everyone, I am Kelly King and welcome to 2023 and our another new year of our You Lead webinars. And today we are really thrilled to just have all of you join us as people are coming online, and we know that it just takes a little while to get people on. And if you're here and if you're joining us, make sure that you open the chat section, and we would love for you to just put your name, where you're from, where you're joining us from. We would love to get to know who's here today. I just want to do a few little like maybe some promos and just information about things that you might want to be aware of with Lifeway as we get started in this conversation. There's a few new Bible studies, but the one that has come out in January that a lot of you have probably been looking forward to is Jen Wilkins' new study on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. The books come with video access as well, so you have everything you need for this Bible study right here. I am going to mention that as of this week, Amazon was actually running out of a buy. That's how many people are doing a buy. But there is plenty of stock on lifeway.com, so you can find it there. We are working with Amazon to get more copies there as well. So just know we are working fast and furious to get our products where you can get them as quickly as you can. So just want to make sure that you know about that. And then some of you may know about Kelly Mentor's re-release of Ruth. And she did not have videos with this Bible study when she did it. It's been several years ago, but she has gone back. She's expanded the study. She's included videos. I know my church is offering this 2 different times during the week, and I think it's a study that people are going to really love too. It's the new year, which also means that a lot of you are starting Bible reading plans, and you're looking at, how you get through scripture, how you spend time in God's word. And I wanted to mention Marcel Hicks, who's on our webinars with us. Marcel is the editor of our Journey Devotional Magazine. And if you've never seen our Journey Devotional Magazine, this is a great way for you to be in God's word every single day. And we have expanded it. It's quarterly now. It's not monthly, so you get 3 months at a time. And one of the great new features about Journey is that if you look on the inside cover, there's a little square here that says 3 simple steps to access your digital devotionals. So when you get a copy of this, you can look in here and you can redeem that code. You can go to the Lifeway Women app, and that way you can do your devotional on the Lifeway Women app. Right now, it's the #1 thing that people are using on the Lifeway Women app. So we know you're finding it, but definitely we want to make sure that you're aware of that. And so that's kind of fun as well. Also, we have a lot of events coming up this year in 2023. So if you're a leader and you are looking for a way to connect your women to maybe an event, and you're thinking this would be a lot easier than me trying to plan an event, then let us help you do that, or bring a group to one of our events. We'd love for you to be at one of our You Lead events. Our first one is at the end of February in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and we're seeing really good numbers, and it's really fun to see women coming back to events. So what you want to check out, Going Beyond Live events with Priscilla Shire, Lifeway Women Live events that are multi-platform events, and then of course we would love to see you at You Lead, or even the Glory events with Jackie Hill Perry. I don't want to forget those. We're in a lot of different cities with that event as well. One event that you may not know about, and there's a special price this week, is the Lifeway Women's West Coast Forum. We are going to be in Southern California in July 13th and 14th. We'll be in Highland, California, which is a little bit inland. So it's not right on the coast, but it's just right there in Southern California. And we are going to have Jen Wilkin, Courtney Doctor, Elizabeth Woodson, Dr. Jeff Orge, Scarlett Hiltebeitel. Like, it's going to be such a fun event. And so we're actually offering a $20 promo on that. And so you can find out more information if you go to lifeway.com. We would love to see you on the West Coast in July at that particular event. Okay, one more thing. Sorry that we have a lot of commercials, but if you are a new women's ministry leader, and what I mean by that is you've been doing this for 3 years or less, we offer a special conference called Essentials. and it is for 25 women only. We only let 25 women in. And our next Essentials Conference is the first week of March. We're going to be on the campus at New Orleans Seminary in New Orleans, which is going to be so much fun. And Dawn, one of our panelists today, Dawn's going to be teaching at this particular event. So I'd love for you to get to spend time with her. But this is 2.5 days. We pay for your lodging. We pay for your meals. All you have to do is get yourself to this conference. So if you want to come to that, if you would let us know, Michelle, if you'll make sure that we put Catherine's email in the chat section, and you can email Catherine for more details. We still have a few spots, and we would love to fill that up. So don't hesitate to do that. It's a great opportunity. Whew, okay, all the commercials. Okay, ladies, I'm so excited to have you on here today. We are talking about the subject of loneliness in leadership, which we know all of us have dealt with at some point or another. And it doesn't matter whether you're in leadership in ministry or other leadership, we know that for a lot of women, loneliness is an issue. So before we jump into the topic, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and the ministry setting that you're in. So Dawn, I'm going to start with you. Dawn Stevens.
Okay, good morning. I'm Dawn Stevens in Birmingham, Alabama. I have served almost 25 years this July here at the Church at Brook Hills as women's minister, and also served in lots of various ways, now giving leadership to special needs ministry as well, and been with the Lifeway over 20 years as a trainer. So that makes me feel and sound old, but we are so glad to be with you ladies today.
Awesome. I am also seeing some in the Q&A section, y'all are saying that the chat was disabled. I'm seeing the chat. I'm seeing people put things. Is it still not working? Do we know, Michelle? It is working? Okay, I just want to make sure. So just in case it wasn't. Thanks, Dawn. Making sure that we got that little technical difficulty out of the way. Vicki, let's have you introduce yourself.
Okay, hello. I'm Vicki Banks. It's so lovely to be here with you all. I co-led my first Bible study when I was about 19 years old in the dorms at the University of Oklahoma, and I pretty much have been involved in leading Bible studies and discipling women ever since then. For the past 6 years, I have served as the women's ministry director at my home church and love that. So I oversee the women's ministry there, as well as some other discipleship things in the church. So have been a traveling speaker. I'm an author, a writer. I do a lot of writing for different publications. So have served in ministry in lots of different ways, both as a laywoman, as well as in more of what you would call professional ministry, I guess. Married my college sweetheart, getting ready to celebrate 40 years of marriage. I know that just sounds crazy to me. I have 2 wonderful young adult married children who have given me 6 grandchildren in 6 years. So it has been hopping in my neck of the woods, but I'm happy to be here with you all today.
So fun. Well, Marcel, introduce yourself.
Hey y'all, I am hailing to you from the San Francisco Bay Area, California, where I am 2 hours ahead of you. I have been in ministry with my husband here as urban missionaries for almost 20 years now. We'll be celebrating 32 years of marriage. That does sound kind of like a long time. Blessed with 5 beautiful children, plus a son in love and the love of my life, my first granddaughter who calls me Nani. So we are urban missionaries here in the San Francisco Bay Area, church planting, and in what we call denominational leadership for an association of 200 churches that we support and serve here in the Bay Area, as well as I've been on staff at one of the largest Christian homeless shelters here for the past, 16 years now. So lots of work, lots of busyness. And when I'm not running around after my granddaughter, I'm slinging nachos at concessions for my teenage basketball star. So it's fun. So that's me. And I'm so blessed to be here with you all today.
Thanks, Marcel. Yeah, I think those of us who've had teenage children in sports, we've all served up a few nachos with fake cheese, right? Right. All right. Dawn and Vicki and Marcel have been on a You Lead webinar, but we have a new panelist and a new trainer that's come on board. As many of you may know Ann Harrison. Ann has been at a lot of our events over the years. And so, Ann, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I can appreciate the slinging nachos, and it does make me never want to eat at a concession stand again. I feel like once you have seen what that cheese looks like prior to getting on the nachos, you never want to eat it. But hi, guys. I'm so glad you guys are here. I am from Wichita Falls, Texas, not from here, but that's where we live. My husband was military, which is what brought us here about, 14 years ago. I've got 3 sons, 21, 18, and 15, which is why I love women's ministry, because everything else in my house and everything else in my life is very masculine. So just really have a tenderness for women and getting them connected. I've served at my home church as women's ministry director for 10 years, started out volunteering, then moved to do extremely part-time work, then a little bit more part-time, and then finally in a full-time position. So have kind of seen the gamut there and just want to encourage you. I think, gosh, you just hear the experience of this panel. You are in for a treat today, and I hope it just encourages your heart.
Yeah. And I think that even just saying what you just said, a lot of women will relate to that. Either they're in volunteer positions, or maybe it's progressed a little bit to part-time, and maybe they're just in the waiting period. Maybe they're just hoping and praying that the Lord will open doors there. And Ann, I'm going to start with you, because let's talk about, why do we often feel lonely in ministry, and why is ministry different? We know that loneliness can happen in all different kinds of leadership. And we want to offer some practical helps, and we want to encourage you today. We want to start with that. But why is it, Ann, that we sometimes have this issue?
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know what you're joining us, if you are a volunteer, if you are maybe on a church staff, maybe as a part-time or full-time, maybe you're a staff wife. Maybe you're just a friend that wants to come along somebody who's in ministry. So no matter what our background is, I think something that makes loneliness in ministry unique is that there's a little bit of a fishbowl experience when you serve in ministry. People think you maybe have it all together, or people think you're not approachable. And suddenly there becomes a little bit of a divide sometimes. And you can feel like, wow, do you not want to get to know the real me? And sometimes we're a little afraid to let that go. I think there's also the side where, as women in ministry, we deal with a lot of brokenness and hurt people, and we hear a lot, and I think we can take on a lot. And I think sometimes in that in itself can start to isolate us a little bit. I think depending on how your church is set up, if you serve in a local church, you may be the only woman at the table, and that in itself can feel lonely and isolating sometimes, even though we love our brothers in Christ and we know that God has called us to complement them, to walk alongside them, to see things maybe in a little different way and bring that richness to the table. But sometimes it can go, are y'all not getting what I'm getting? Are you not seeing what I'm seeing? And so I think sometimes that can cause a loneliness. And then, of course, we can't discount that there's spiritual warfare, right? And Satan wants to take women in ministry out. He hates us, guys. I wish I had better news, but I don't. But we know that we have a Savior who has walked through the most lonely times and is right there with us. So if that can be nothing else but an encouragement that Jesus knows where you are, he sees you, and you are not alone.
Yeah, you've hit on a lot of high level topics that we want to dive into, because I think some of the things that you have mentioned, we have some questions that kind of get specific about some of those issues. So thank you for kind of giving us that little bit of overview. And Marcel, I think one of the things when we talk about loneliness is that in leadership, you can be around a lot of people and still feel really disconnected. And so how does that happen?
Well, I think that's one thing to make clear, that, there's a difference between being alone, being the only one, or being physically alone where you're by yourself. And then that place of being in the midst of other people, but still feeling like you're there by yourself. And you hit on it. I mean, it's pretty much disconnectedness, in the sense of how we combat loneliness is by feeling connected and feeling apart. So when we are not feeling that way, that means that there's something that's going on that doesn't make us feel a part of whatever that environment is, that group of people is. And then oftentimes in leadership, because we are so busy providing for people and meeting their needs and, carrying their concerns, then we struggle with being able to receive that, because oftentimes I think the issue is we become disconnected because others will perceive us as being okay and we're just fine and we don't need anything. And then in our minds, we're thinking, well, I have needs too, but because we're in this leadership role, it oftentimes isolates us from being able to receive that. So for us as leaders, whatever the leadership capacity is, realize that communication is vitally important. And not only is communication important, vulnerability is important in the sense of allowing others to step into that place that can be trusted, to know how to be able to meet your needs while you're meeting the needs of others.
Well, and meeting the needs of others really does kind of tie into my next question, because sometimes as in leadership, you're so busy trying to like meet the needs or of other people, and people can assume that you're not lonely, but yet it can wear you down. And so Dawn, I want to ask you, like, sometimes we experience, like leaders experience kind of a compassion fatigue, and they will isolate themselves because they just need a break from people. So how do we guard against that?
Yeah, and that's real, and that's a real struggle for anyone that serves in ministry. Just a few things that I would say I've learned, and I'm even trying to remind myself this year, is prioritizing your own self-care, your own time, both in the Word, your time away with God, but your weekly schedule. And if you're not clear what the expectations are from your church or your staff, find that out. When do you expect me in the office? When do you expect me available? For myself, Friday and Saturday is an off day. So I've even told my leaders just yesterday, if I get a text over a Friday or Saturday, if it's not urgent, I will return it on Monday or Sunday afternoon, because Sunday's a work day. So that way they know what to expect from me, and I can actually have some downtime to rest, take care of myself, let my mind rest. Because when we care for people, our mind and hearts are tired, especially in seasons of suffering. And we all live with people that have lots of suffering in their lives. So look at your time, your schedule, and your time away from God, how you're caring for yourself, and then holding those personal boundaries pretty healthy, because when some people are hurting, they want all your time and availability. Also, stay in your lane. If you are a trained counselor, okay, but most of us are not. So what is your role? Kind of DTR, define the relationship. What am I supposed to do? What do they need to do? Where can I give them resources? Where can I give them a professional in the community where I can, and what is my role for them? Is it a friend? Is it an encourager? And let them take the natural steps they need to take in their wellness. So those are two things I would say: your time, and then your role in relation to people you serve.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think that a lot of times, and this isn't out, it doesn't always mean just ministry, but I do see it a lot in ministry, is that you feel like you are everybody's all the time, or they feel like they have access to you all of the time. And so setting those boundaries and kind of protecting some of that, Dawn, I think that that's a good reminder for all of us, and that we do need to set some of those boundaries and actually to take the day off when you can. That doesn't mean that emergencies don't happen. We know that. But for the most part, most people they need to understand that they can wait a little bit to have access to you. Vicki, I want to turn to you for a second too, because we know that friendship will help combat loneliness. But I think women tend to, like, if there's one thing we will put aside, we'll put aside friendship, because we know family's going to come first. We know that that's priority. We know that our church ministry, but in some ways we just need to have some friends too. So how can women leaders develop those friendships?
Absolutely. It is a huge need. I don't know why, but it seems like God wired us as women more relational. And so we really feel that disconnect. I do have great friendships that I've worked really hard at over the years. I have a standing coffee date every Wednesday with a girlfriend of mine, but she doesn't do any of the things that I do in ministry. I mean, she loves her people. We have a lot of ways that we connect and we overlap, but what I do as a speaker, as a writer, as a women's ministry leader, as a Bible teacher, none of those are things that she does. So we don't share that. So I do think it's really important that we develop friendships with like-hearted women who are involved in ministry the same way we are. I think that's very, very important. So some of the things that come to my mind, first is recognize the need that we all have. God did not wire us to be lone rangers, and we will burn out. We need the love and care of friends. We need to give it and we need to receive it as well. So first, recognize the need. Second, I think we need to look for opportunities to connect with like-hearted women in ministry environments. And oftentimes when you're in ministry, it's nose to the ground. You're just trying to get your stuff done. So that's why I say look for opportunities. So for example, when I started traveling as a Christian speaker and started to get into publishing, I got involved with a group that's what they did. And so anytime they got together, I mean, I flew to Florida, I flew to Louisiana, so for their yearly get together, I went and I looked for those opportunities. As a denominational leader, I have been involved in different types of teams just over in my state leadership. And so I'm always, if there's a conference specifically for women in leadership or women in ministry or a special day of a larger conference they do, I go and I attend that. Looking for opportunities, just looking for opportunities. And when I do that, I meet like the woman who's a women's ministry leader at a church, 20 minutes away from me. So I'm always looking for opportunities where those women are going to be. And then the third thing I would say is be really intentional about following up. And that's the difficult part, right? But doing the initiate. As women, we all want that girl to come to us. We don't even go to the bathroom by ourselves in a group, right? But I think we need to be the women that are initiating. So that means when I am at a conference where there are other speakers, other writers, I've got to be all there at the moment. Yes, it's easier for me to stay in my room till the last minute and work on my own deadline. But if I hear women out in the hallway, I better get myself out in the hallway. If there's a group of them going to dinner, I better go to dinner. And I need to engage and initiate. I need to get to know them. I need to invest in them. So not just looking for people to invest in me, not just doing the work God's given me to do, but looking for opportunities to connect with other women and then really making the most of them. Showing up, engaging, asking the questions, paying attention, having the fun, doing all the things.
I think that is so good. And while you were saying that, it reminded me of a time that I went to a conference by myself and I knew that I wasn't going to know anybody. I mean, I might have known just who a couple of the speakers were, but I wasn't going to pal around with them. And I remember thinking, okay, I have to make an effort to go sit by someone at every meal and I'm going to get to know them. And the Lord was so kind, and like I met some incredible women at that conference that are still friends today. And one of them, I was standing in line for lunch and she said, "Hey, I know you. I'm from Oklahoma," because I was in Oklahoma at the time. And I was like, "You know who I am?" And so we started talking and she became part of a leadership team for me. And she's in Washington, D.C. now, and we still stay in touch. And so that's and it's a good reminder too of, we love to promote our leadership events. We love to teach at our leadership events, but we want you to come and we want you to get to know other women who are like you, who get you, who understand what you're going through. So that's a big part of our training events that we do at Lifeway as well. Okay. Vicki said something and someone actually asked, I noticed this in the chat section. So Anne, I think we need to address it because sometimes we ask the question, okay, so if at your church, your friendships, they tend to be kind of internal, but sometimes it's good to have friendships that are not connected to maybe ministry. So let's talk about that kind of friendship.
That's great. And I did want to address something. If you are on a church staff and your family attends the church, which I would assume, if you're on a church staff, your family is attending the church that you're serving in, sometimes going and verbally all over your family is not the way to go. And I just say this from personal experience. I think this is why it is so key to have friendships outside of your church, because I still want my kids and husband to come in. I don't sugarcoat things, but I want them to come into our church and worship, and the spiritual authority that they've put in their lives, our pastoral staff. I want them to still see this as a place of worship and not just a place that has made mom angry for some reason or another, because I just come home and become unhinged. So I think, one, that's so important for us to really cultivate friendships outside of our church, because our friendships can be objective. I have some really sweet friends the Lord gave me in college that I still get to call and go, oh my gosh, what do I do here? Or help me here. How does your church do this? And they serve in different capacities. Some are on church staff, some are just volunteers. And I think you get a different perspective, because you kind of can become siloed in your own church and your own ministry and your own mission, and the culture of that. And I think to be able to step outside also makes you go, oh, it's not just me. So I think whenever we can start making those connections outside of our church, it's important. And I'm sure a lot of people on here don't necessarily serve in their local church. So just being able to make those connections across ministries, across parachurch, I just think it's so vital for us to have friends that we can call on and lean on, that are objective, and they're not going to see the day-to-day that we see, the underbelly of the whale a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's some boundaries there too, of just having those friendships that are a little bit removed from all the internal things, and they can give you new perspective too, right? Yeah, for sure. Okay, Marcel, you have a big family. You mentioned, you've got a lot of people that, you're caring for in a lot of different ways. And so I think it's really easy when someone looks at a leader and they go, wow, she's got lots going on and she doesn't need a friend, or she's busy. But I do think we have to address, how do you juggle the dynamics of balancing the needs of your family, but also your needs for friendship and for that connectedness?
That's a really challenging thing. So, and I've tried different things over the years, some of them not successful, one of them being insomnia, where I just didn't sleep because I needed to have enough time to be able to handle all the people and all the things. And that was detrimental. So what I had to revert to doing, and this sounds kind of stale, but calendar. Literally, I calendar everything from the basketball games to the school meetings to, the things that my daughters are doing professionally, making sure that I have time with them. I'm texting on a regular basis. And guys, even to the point of, I set alarms for myself to remember to pray, to call, to text. It sounds crazy, but when you have a very active lifestyle, you have to use the tools that are around you. And Google is one of my best friends. So I look at my Google Calendar. I'm constantly doing things to be reminders, because in the midst of all the busyness, if I don't write it down or record it or give myself a reminder, I'll forget. And then what that means is I don't show up for someone, then I start feeling guilty and going through this, the pity party and all of that. So it's vitally important. And I mentioned that word earlier, just being intentional about everything you do. We schedule our family time. We schedule, when we're going to do special things. I have on the calendar any special mementos or things that are going to happen with the family, so that I don't forget, because I do want to be present. The flip side of that is people are watching your life, and oftentimes they don't feel that you have time for them. And sometimes we can come off that way. I really had to take a step back in ministry, as a ministry wife. And, our congregants said to my husband, your wife never speaks to me, because I would be coming in and like headed to the sound booth or getting ready for whatever was going to happen with service, and had to be very mindful of the people around me to connect with them. And then realizing that they have something to offer me. That's the other thing too. I think as leaders, sometimes we forget that being in relationship with people, and we've talked about friends, and what you need to do is understand that not every person is going to fulfill all of your needs. So it's fine to have different kinds of friends in different settings. One of my best, closest friends, she and I lived on the same walkway at seminary for 3 years together. We walked by each other's homes. kids played together and everything, but we didn't become intimate friends until we went away to a retreat. And after the retreat was over and done with, we spent another 3 hours connecting and realized how much we had in common. So a lot of it is just intentionality and being proactive about it, and being very cognizant of the fact that you do have a busy schedule. So how are you going to include what's needed for you to be replenished in the midst of that? You
Yeah.
should you shouldn't be serving from just the bare minimum. You should be serving from your overflow. So getting full is really important for you before you pour out to others.
That's good. That's really good, Marcel. And I do like your, I mean, I have to calendar a lot of things too. And even if it's just, I'm going to have lunch with someone, or I'm going to schedule time with someone, that it is time, and your time is precious, but you know, make time for those things. You want to definitely do that. Dawn, you have a really good network of friendships within ministry leaders, either our Lifeway trainers, you know, we all have a pretty some close friendships because we kind of get each other and we serve together in ministry and do that. But you also have some local leaders that you've gotten to know over the years. So how do you maintain those relationships when you feel like you've got relationships that are all over the place?
That's a good question. I would encourage you, if you don't have a tribe of women's leaders in your community, find them. They're there. Sometimes you have to ask, you have to get on websites, you have to call and say, which I did that when I started years ago. There was one lady that was full-time ministry in our city, and I called, introduced myself. I'd like to take you to coffee. Can I get to know you? And so you just start finding those women, volunteer, part-time, full-time, who are like you. So I would encourage you to find those women, keep a list, maybe ask them out for coffee or lunch periodically. And that has grown. So we now have a network of women's ministry leaders in our city that we wanted to have for years. And we finally got that off the ground. We don't meet as often as we'd like. We'd like it to be more regular, but we do have a Facebook page. You could have a group me or a text group, but some way that you stay connected to women in your community across denominations, I think is very important, across sizes of churches. You know, that way, if there's something the whole community is going through, maybe there's a plant that closes and a lot of families are affected, and there's then you can pray together, you can bond together. How do we help the wives and the women in this community since this plant's closed, or there's been something tragic, heaven forbid. So I just encourage you to find your tribe in your area. And again, it's little one at a time. You meet them and just, you know that they understand where you are. They're good resourcers. They're good prayer warriors. They get it. And especially women that have gone ahead of you, done it longer. I would encourage you to stay in close relationship there with those type women.
Dawn, you mentioned something too that I think we don't always think about, but we do when a crisis happens. But let's just say there's a natural disaster or there's a crisis in your community. And as a leader, if you don't have those relationships, you're scrambling a little bit to try to find like the resources and who to connect with. But if you're intentional on the front end, that you're right, like they become, you bonded together a little bit and you know who to go to. And some of you may be on this webinar and you're thinking, well, I'm in this little bitty town and really there's not a lot of people that get me. Well, that's why you do need to find those friendships, even at conferences or outside places, and try to find that tribe, like as Dawn kind of mentioned that. And I know for us, we do have a group me text that when we have prayer requests or things are happening, and that does keep us connected. And so I really appreciate just even the technology that we have today that we can stay connected. Were you going to say something else, Dawn?
Yeah, one more thing. It doesn't have to be a woman in ministry leadership. It can be a woman in leadership. It can be a school principal. It can be a professor at the university. It can be a lady in the senior administration of a business. It could be, the principal of your child's school. It could be someone in the secular marketplace in leadership as a woman. She still understands the challenges you walk through. And that also gives you gospel opportunities to share Christ and be Christ with people that may not be believers, but they're women leaders. And so I would encourage you, look beyond the church as well to your community.
I think that's a good word too, because sometimes we insulate ourselves and we don't have friendships we need to cultivate friendships with non-believers so that we can be the gospel to them and we can have those opportunities to share Christ. That's a good word. Vicki, I think too, there is sometimes an assumption that her friendship quota is full. Like she has no room for any more friends. So I'm not going to ask her, I'm not going to push this, but how has that played out in your life? Like, have you seen that happen? And how do you kind of make room for more friends?
Absolutely. That is such a good question. I do think there's an assumption that we have friends, and to an earlier question that you asked, and that we are busy. And both of those assumptions are true for me. I am very busy and I do have friends. But like Marcel said, good grief, when is it not a good time to make a new girlfriend? You know, people are fascinating and everybody has a story. And I think one of the things that most helps me is I do have a natural fascination about people. Why do they do what they do? How do they make them work? How does, what makes them tick the way they do? But in my life, how that's normally played out, and I've had to come to peace with this over the years, is that generally I'm the initiator for a new relationship. And I know we don't always like that as women. We want to be the one people come to. But I realized years ago, they're not necessarily coming because they don't think I don't seem fun or friendly. They just think I don't have time. They think, and they know I have other friends. So generally I have to initiate. And what that means is, so like years ago, after my mother passed away, it was a really difficult season in my life. And I wasn't able to teach as much as I had been before. But there's a Christian counseling course, there's a Christian counseling company in my town, and they offered Bible classes. I'd always wanted to take them. I'd never been able to. I knew none of my girlfriends would really be interested in that, but there was a younger woman at my church that I thought, I bet she would be really interested in this. So I asked her if she wanted to take the class with me, and it ended up being this beautiful friendship. We started going, we not only did we get together for class, then we started to get together for dinner every week before class. And she just brought so much joy and happiness to a really dark season in my life. But if I hadn't made the ask, if I hadn't reached out, it would have never happened. I would have missed the class. I would have missed out on this fabulous friendship with this witty, warm, sharp young woman. And I also would hope that I brought some value to her life as well. But I had to make the ask. And that's often the way it is. And I think we do just kind of have to come to peace with that.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Okay, I want to switch kind of gears just a little bit. We've talked a lot about friendships and connecting with people, but Marcel, I want to kind of think about, there are some dangers to loneliness. So when we think about our emotional health, our mental health, things like that, what are some of the dangers of loneliness?
Well, I was just listening to Vicki, and with me being an introvert, it's not necessarily always, easy for me to be the initiator. But what I realize, when we don't do that, we are actually negating how God said he created us to be. If we think about it in Genesis, when we go back to the creation account, the very first thing that God said was, let us make man in our image. So we were created to be in relationship. And I took a little bit of time to look at that, and going back in the creation account, and then as God is creating, and he said the only thing that was not good was for man to be alone. And a lot of times we think in terms of the man and the wife, the husband and the wife relationship, but he created us to be in relationship. And then when I got even deeper, I love studying words. That word in the Hebrew alone, you know what it is? Bad. I'm serious. That's the word. So ultimately it means where you are separated, where you are not in unity. And so when we are experiencing loneliness, and I remember when I lost the last member of my family of origin, here I have this huge immediate family, but there was this loneliness that set in because I felt like I was orphaned and I didn't belong anywhere, or anyone who had known me, all of my life was gone. And so what we have to do is, again, be very transparent and realizing that, for one, the enemy's goal is to separate us, is to isolate us. And then we live in a world that's constantly telling you to do you and be individual and focus on what's important to you and everything else. So all of those things go directly against the way God originally created us. And what we have to be careful about is, falling prey to the lies. No one cares about me. All people want is for me to do something for them. They don't think, or they're not concerned with my needs or my concerns. And we can start creating this self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense of we're not being available. Like Vicki said, we're isolating ourselves. We are appearing to be standoffish. And again, negating what it said that God wanted us to be in relationship. The other side of it is when we don't express our need, oftentimes we're afraid to do that. We're vulnerable because we don't want to be vulnerable because we're leaders. And, it's like, I'm supposed to be providing for other people. So if they think I have a need, then, they may not want to be around me. The other thing is that women fall prey, unfortunately, to this horrible thing about comparison. We're always comparing ourselves to one another. And, oh, well, she's got it all together. And I'm looking at her Facebook life and it just looks great. Don't fall prey to the lies. That is, again, a tool of the enemy deceiving us to go against what it is that God says. Not everybody is going to be your friend, but there should be those people where you are able to have an intimate, dynamic, reciprocal relationship with, where each of you are bringing something for each other. You have those times where you're just pouring out, but then the other side of it is you have to have a well-balancing of your relationship. And I remember being in seminary, the way it was described was this figure as the 360. The 360 is a circle, and in the circle, the immediate, to your right and to your left, those are your peers. The one that's down at the 6 o'clock is those that you're pouring into, and the one up at the 12 o'clock is those that are pouring into you. We need to have that full balance as leaders of relationships in our lives in order to not get off kilt in what it is that we're doing. So when we don't do that, as Dr. Orge, one of our speakers for West Coast Forum, who I'm hoping to see you guys at, says there could be a dark side of leadership that oftentimes we're not even aware of, and we are modeling for others. And that's what they think leadership is supposed to look like. We're untouchable, we're unreachable. So it's very important to not fall prey to that.
Well, and you mentioned Dr. Orge, and he has a book called The Painful Side of Leadership. And if you subscribe to our Ministry to Women newsletter, you're automatically entered to win. Like we're going to pick a winner of that book, which I just read it this summer, and it addresses a lot of different things that leaders go through. And I would just suggest that book. And Michelle's going to put some resources in the chat section too, because all of our panelists submitted some good resources that we think will be really helpful. I'm kind of like looking at what we have left because it's 11:42, and Dawn, I'm going to ask you this question because you've been in ministry for several years, but I want to just does it get easier? Does it get harder? And how, there's different seasons, right, of loneliness. So how do you deal with just the ups and downs of that?
I think it gets easier and harder. I think for myself, since 2017, and some of the folks on staff with me have agreed, just the suffering in our congregation and in our world has ratcheted up for many reasons. We know that is scripture being fulfilled, but the loss and grief and suffering has really increased. I know I came in the first day after Christmas break into the office, and we'd had two families that had significant losses over the holidays. And so I'm usually not a down person, but it really got me down the next day. And I just came in and talked to one of our pastors and said, I need prayer. And we work together in pastoral ministry. And so we're friends, and we need to be able to say when we need prayer, when we need help. And he and I talked through and agreed, and we prayed, and my spirit was lifted, and I felt like, okay, I can go back and do this. So it does get harder because sin gets darker, and but then it gets easier, I think, because you have had those experiences. You see God move, you see people healed, you see people uplifted, so you know the end of the story. we see people pass, but we know they're in heaven. So it is easier and harder. I think we can, when it's harder, we can pull back and just try to get through the day, try to just get the list checked off. Probably mentally it's harder, and emotionally, because you have those people in your mind and your heart. And when they come to my mind, I just try to pray for them. That's the Lord bringing them to mind, and that relieves some of that burden. So it is easier and harder. Again, having the friend outside the church, I feel, is key. I have that. We talked about the boundaries, and just going to the Lord, and however that you journal or you pray, having that time with him to let him hear your heart.
Okay, I'm going to ask all of you this question, and then if you have questions that you have either put in the chat or the Q&A, Michelle's going to address those here in just a second, and we'll give the panelists a chance to answer. But I want to ask all of you, because I know that in the context of working with men, and we mentioned this early on, Anne, that sometimes it can feel lonely if the majority of people that you're around a lot for the majority of the day are going to be men, and you want to keep those proper boundaries. So how do you combat loneliness in those settings? So I want to kind of hear from everybody. Who wants to jump in first? Anybody? They're all looking at me like, I don't know. Who wants to tackle this? Vicki, go for it.
Well, the guys, they're always they'll get together alone and they'll, shoot hoops at lunch, or they'll go do something. And so finally, I just decided, there are other women that serve in my church. They don't serve in women's ministry like I do. They don't serve with adults. They work with children and preschoolers and stuff like that. But they at least know what it's like to pour yourself out nonstop to other people. They know what it's like to be on a predominantly male staff. So we generally, as women, we get together once a month for lunch. We're all there. It's a lunch. Everybody eats. We're not asking for a half a day or a full day. It's just a lunch once a month. But that's a helpful thing that we can do. The other thing is taking advantage of this is a little off, but like if I have gone to a conference for speakers or writers or women in leadership or whatever, I engage with the woman sitting next to me in a workshop or in a session, and if there's always a break between those things, it's like, hey, would you want to grab a coffee before the next session? If I can tell that there's something, relatable or whatever. So I think part of it is making the most of what you have, not looking, I don't have time to, invest 5 hours in something this week, but I've got a lunch, I can do coffee. I can sit 30 minutes, on somebody's porch, I can walk around the block with somebody else. So I think it's really trying to take advantage of where God has you. The missionary Jim Elliot was really famous for a lot of things, but he has one saying that is, wherever you are, be all there. And so I think trying to be all there and trying to engage with the women that are there, and then creating, like we've talked about, relationships with women who aren't in our home church. So if there's not women in my home church, there's a church 20 minutes away from me, and there is a woman doing women's ministry there. So not too long ago, we met for coffee. I checked on her the other day. I sent her a text to check up on something I knew going on in her life. So just making the most of the time that we do have, instead of focusing on what we don't have, and that we are the minority of where we're serving.
Anybody want to add to what Vicki said? She covered a lot. That was good.
I think being aware when the enemy's talking, they don't understand you, they don't get you, they don't get women's ministry, they don't value you, and really seeing that for what it is, and seeing them as brothers in Christ, and relating to them as brothers. I put in the chat a great classic resource. I think it's 20 years old. It's still on Amazon, Mixed Ministry. I read it completely for our webinar. We have a webinar out there from April of 2021 on this topic. But it's got some really rich teaching there. But just understanding truth, what is not, and operating in that truth about the brothers that you serve with.
I like that, Dawn. I was thinking in regards to the same aspect of, why does God have you there? Because God opened up the door for you to be there. So what are you supposed to bring to the table, in the sense of just even enlightening them? Oftentimes, when we are the minority as a woman in a setting that is predominantly male, we will not voice, we will not, necessarily make ourselves known or heard. But here, God has opened up this door for you to be able to do that. And I know that when I've had opportunities to do that, and I do bring my voice in, and I'm always thinking, okay, how's that going to go? But it usually always goes well. And then I get these comments or, conversation where I'll have a brother come and say to me, I really appreciated you saying that. I really appreciate your perspective and your viewpoint, you bringing that to the table to bring another voice in. It's like a lot of times when we are in ministry settings and we as women know what needs to happen, our voice needs to be heard in order to help bring understanding and enhancement to whatever ministry responsibilities we have. But just think in terms of the fact that God opened that door for you. So what way is he going to use you to influence them as a part of this community? And it is a community that you are a part of. So take advantage of that and use it for your good.
Good job. Okay, Michelle, I know I've not been able to keep up with the chat because I'm just trying to make sure that we're staying on
No, we're
track,
good.
but
We're good.
there's
We've
a
got
lot
a
of good
great,
comments happening.
yes, great comments, really great. A really wonderful question from Ashley. How do you balance authenticity and vulnerability as a leader, but not err on the side of oversharing or complaining? So anybody take that one.
I'll start. Ashley, I think that's such a good question. And I think that's something that as a leader, we all struggle with. And I don't think it's out of the heart of thinking, I don't want people to think I have it all together, because I definitely don't. So I think it's knowing where there's safe places and where there's not, and knowing the groups that you can share more or less. I try never to share anything about a family member, about, what I want to be vulnerable with is what is my story to share. And so I think being able to discern what that is and talk about, hey, I'm having a hard time with XYZ. And I just want you guys to know that I struggle too. I think that helps. I think where we have to be really careful in the oversharing or complaining is when we bring other people into it, whether it's people we work with, people that we're in church with. I think that's where we really just need to be on our guard, and just ask the Lord to discern that. But there is nothing more important in ministry, I feel like, than vulnerability. Because, we look at Jesus. He was down in the dirt. He moved towards broken people. And that's what he calls us to do. So how we do that looks a little different. I think even in different situations, there's certain ones where you feel like you are not safe to share anything. But for the most part, people love you. They want to know you. They want to know why Jesus works for you, not just in your job in ministry, but in your life. So I think whenever you can share that, that's a really sweet spot.
It's great. Anybody else?
Yeah, one thought I had about that was, I think I really did a disservice to myself earlier in ministry, because I think I was so concerned about seeming competent that I maybe didn't share all the parts of my life. I only really shared the successes and things that were well. And with the advent of more birthdays, shall we say, not only do I appreciate transparency more in other people, but I also realize the value of it. One, if you're not transparent, you make other people feel worse about themselves because they tend to think of you like they look at social media like, oh, she's got it all together and I'm a washout because I'm struggling. So if you don't share those things, you actually make them feel worse. So not only do you make yourself unapproachable, but you make their problems seem bigger and you make them seem worse. So on that front, I have learned from experience just the value that is. Then as far as how you share, Well, we should have the Christian maturity, first of all, to know how to share in ways that aren't dishonoring to somebody else, and to know what is and isn't appropriate. There are some things that I wouldn't share from the stage, but I would be able to share with the women in my small group. So I need to have that discernment. So I'm transparent from the stage, but maybe different than I am with a smaller group of people. And if I had an issue, like say really personal, like with a family or a child, a husband or a child, like Ann said, I'm not going to share anything that is going to disparage them. I might share that, hey, I'm struggling with something, or, like I said, this would be more in a smaller group setting. I could use your prayer on how to best respond to this person in my family. I can't share all the details right now, but I'm heartbroken about this, and I really need you guys to pray. So sometimes it's not even sharing all the details, but saying, hey, we got problems, and I need some prayer cover. So, and then sometimes it's sharing different levels, but it's also how we share about the things that we share. I mean, I should, even if I'm unhappy with my fellow church leadership, Christian maturity would state that I don't trash talk them even to my husband, so I'm not going to do it from a platform or in a women's group, because that's not appropriate on any setting whatsoever. It's not helpful. It's not valuable. So just a thought.
Great. That's great. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to kind of sum up another question that actually came from a couple different angles from people who are leaders, and especially in a church setting or in a Christian organization setting. And it was basically, any thoughts on how to lovingly and gently care for others, but not giving the impression that we can have regular evenings with them. I think is what they were speaking to, is when a lot of times when you're a leader, especially in church, people gravitate towards you. You're fun, you're friendly, you're kind. But that can take away from, this is really a lot about boundaries, I think, here in this question. And basically she was talking about they were struggling because there's just a lot of great people in their church, and they want to be their best friends, and they're exhausted. And so as a leader, a lot of times that loneliness is in the form of so many people around, but almost too many. It's the pond is wide, but not deep. How would you encourage her and or help with the boundary setting there?
I mean, that's definitely a place where you have to be intentional. My husband is extremely relational, and he would love to have everybody in, our ministry walk coming to our house, but oftentimes that's not realistic. So, yeah, she said something in regards to, people are reaching out, and they have a need in regards to them, being there and being available for them. But that does not necessarily mean that that's a reciprocal relationship. You will have those relationships where you're pouring out and pouring out. And if that's a part of your ministry, you have to be mindful of the fact, like I said earlier, what's going to pour into me in order for me to show up in those relationships in a way that is effective. So there's a separating actually of them. It's not that they're not your friends, but what we're talking about, I think, in regards to that deep, intimate community where you can be transparent and you can be vulnerable, is not necessarily where you're providing for their needs, but there is this reciprocity that is able to be received from the relationship. And it takes time to develop those. So understand the difference between the two dynamics in those relationships. That is a ministry role, and you have to replenish yourself in the midst of it, or you will face compassion fatigue. We talked about that. But God has also equipped you with what you need. So seeking his wisdom and discernment, even in regards to, okay, maybe I'm connecting with these people because this is a part of my ministry responsibility, and even scheduling that out. It depends on how large the ministry is and how much time you have to be able to connect for a family dinner with someone, or to have a cup of coffee with someone. But separate that from what is needed for you to be able to be filled up by the relationships that are renewing, refreshing, and revitalizing for you. Those are, I believe, two totally different things, and don't misconstrue them, because that is the role that you fulfill in ministry.
Hey, Michelle, I have one more quick comment on that. I think I would say I have so enjoyed getting to know you and spending time with you. And you know that I'm here if you ever need anything, but I really want to make sure you're connected to a small group community of other women in our church. Are you? And if they're not, intentionally connect them to one that you know might have a little bandwidth, may have a like story, and intentionally connect her to that woman and say, I'd love you to help her find some other close, new friends here at the church. And then you're kind of handing off. Let her know that. You don't say hand off, you say, I want you to have people that are a little more accessible than I might can be, and consistent with weekly small group. And I'm going to introduce you to that leader. I think that's an option.
That's great.
That's really good. Hey, Michelle, we are right at noon. I'm so sorry. I know that we could keep going for a little bit longer, but these have been like your chat section today. Like you guys were really encouraging one another, and I really, really appreciate that. And some of the things that you have said and just, put in that chat section. I also wanted to mention there was a question about connecting older, younger women. We actually have a webinar this year on intergenerational ministry that is going to be July 27th, but you can sign up for any of the webinars for the rest of the year. We're only doing 7 this year, but you can go to lifewaywomen.com. You can even just in the search bar put webinars. I put the link in the chat section, so if you want to scroll up a second and find that link, go ahead and do that. You can sign up for all the webinars and we'll send you the reminders, things like that. You can look at that, and we're talking about event planning next month, and then ministering to single women. This is a huge issue that I feel like will be a great conversation. Developing healthy habits, intergenerational ministry, adapting to leadership change, and then finally we're going to round out the year in November with spiritual warfare. That'll be a good webinar as well. Thank you so much. It is noon, and I really do want to be mindful of your time. Thanks, Dawn, Vicki, Marcel, Anne, and Michelle for being here today. And I hope that you will join us next month when we talk about events and planning events. Thanks so much. Goodbye.